The Philadelphia 76ers made a huge move by signing Daryl Morey to a 5-year contract to be their new president of basketball operations. And this lines up perfectly with Doc Rivers' 5-year contract that he signed to be the head coach. So what this is telling me is the 76ers are betting on Rivers and Morey having the same philosophy for where the team is going over the next few seasons. The biggest question that will surround the 76ers is what exactly is that vision? Does it mean trading one of Embiid or Simmons? Does it mean trying to find a way to move on from the Al Horford and Tobias Harris contracts? We aren't really sure what it is, but the Philadelphia 76ers are going to need to find that out. Before we move on in this video, I want to ask you guys to please consider subscribing to the channel. I do other NBA talks like this, as well as NBA 2K rebuilds, my GM stuff, and then just overall reactions to news in the NBA. So if you guys could consider subscribing to the channel, I'm trying to hit 2,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Once we hit 2,000 subscribers, there will be a giveaway, and you need to be subscribed to get entered into that. So I appreciate that all. Also drop a like on today's video, and let's go talk about why the 76ers need to trade their star players. The huge concern over the past few seasons is that Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid will never work out together and become a championship level team, mostly due to the poor spacing that they provide, plus that the team around them really does not complement their skill sets at all, and those two massive contracts with Horford and Harris just put the team in a very bad spot financially and also trade-wise, free agent-wise, everything. Nobody is going to be able to come and help that team without some major moves being done. What makes it even worse is that the previous regime did not do anything to surround Embiid and Simmons with shooters. They brought in a few players they thought would help, like I said before, Horford and Harris, and just hasn't done anything. Daryl Morey will be faced with some tough questions and some very tough decisions in just his first season. With 4 players making north of $27 million this coming season, the 76ers find themselves cash-strapped and over the luxury tax threshold. The assumption has been that the salary cap and luxury tax line will stay flat for this coming season, remaining at $109 million and $132 million respectively. This puts the 76ers' $147 million payroll already more than $15 million over the tax line. That will cost the 76ers owners nearly $50 million in tax penalties. Not exactly a great price to pay for a likely 5 seed with no clear path of improvement. The only feasible way for the 76ers to save their future would be to trade money from their books. Now, they could try and dump some of the salaries like Horford and Harris. The problem is no team is going to give an asset for either of those contracts. The 76ers would be forced to attach an asset of their own just to send Horford or Harris to another team. And that asset could be a player or it could also be future draft picks. However, the likeliest outcome in my opinion is that the 76ers would need to instead trade one of Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid to start a de facto rebuild. The reason I say that is because it would be really hard to put the right pieces around Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid if they had to attach an asset just to get off the Horford or Harris contract. Those assets could be used to trade for another player, draft a player, but instead, if they have to trade those assets away, they cannot use those, and they still really don't have much money to work with. I just don't see a future outlook that looks good with both Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid on this team. So Philly faces one of the most difficult decisions of all. Either trade Embiid or Simmons, or never make it over the hump. Now, the first choice should be easy. One of them needs to be sent packing. The second choice, however, is a little bit more difficult. Which one? There are arguments for keeping both players and trading both players, and all of those arguments, I agree, are valid. But one interesting thing to note, Daryl Morey led the team that last season shot the most overall three-point shots, and they also traded away their only rotational player that was over the height of 6'8". Now you look at Joel Embiid, you look at Ben Simmons. Simmons is 6'10". Embiid is a 7-footer. Neither of them are particularly good three-point shooters. Simmons doesn't shoot them at all. Sure, Embiid does take some three-point shots, about 3 a game, and Embiid shoots about 33% from deep. Not exactly what you would call spacing in today's NBA. So Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, both virtually go exactly against what Daryl Morey has stood for in his time in Houston. Now, it is fair to question whether it was Mike D'Antoni or Daryl Morey making those decisions in Houston, but the point still stands that Daryl Morey sent away Clint Capella, the only person over 6'8" in the rotation, to Atlanta to run the super small ball lineup. That just doesn't fit what Philly has on their roster, and it'll be really interesting to see if they take a similar course in Philly. So, with two players who are seemingly terrible fits with Morey's extreme analytical approach to the game of basketball, we need to look into who is the best choice to trade off this team. First, let's talk contracts. Embiid and Simmons are both locked up on contracts that are nearly identical over the next 3 seasons. After those 3 years, Embiid's contract is up and Simmons will have 2 years remaining. This decision would not affect the 76ers in the short term, but it comes down to if they want cap flexibility in 3 years, or if they would prefer to have their star locked up for a couple more seasons. If I had to bet, they'd lean towards keeping Ben Simmons when it comes to strictly the contract situation. Another thing to keep in mind is player health. Now, both of these players have had their fair share of injury concerns over their short careers. Both players missed their entire first season in the NBA. Embiid actually missed his first 2. Simmons has been mostly healthy since that point, playing almost full seasons each year before missing the end of the 2019-2020 NBA season with a knee injury. Embiid had struggled with the injury bug in every season throughout his career. He not only missed his first 2 seasons, but he hasn't played more than 64 games in a season since. Ben Simmons had the more recent injury, but Embiid has had the longer list of problems. I'd say this factors into keeping Simmons rather than Embiid when we talk about player health. The biggest thing to consider when making a move to trade one of your best players is to consider their value on the trade market. In my opinion, Embiid and Simmons sit in the same tier of players in the NBA. Some argue that Simmons is a bit better, some argue that Joel Embiid is a bit better, but I think currently when healthy, they are both about the same tier, and you can argue it either way you want to. I won't be too mad about it, but I personally would put them at the same level currently. Talent-wise, it is close to a wash regardless, so really which one you're going to trade comes down to 3 specific things. First, the player's contract situations. Second, the player's health, both things we already talked about. And third is the other team's specific needs on their roster. When we're talking about potential trades, Ben Simmons takes the cake in all 3 of those categories. This pushes me into the side of trading away Ben Simmons and keeping Joel Embiid if I am Daryl Morey. Teams around the league would be willing to offer a much better package for Simmons than they would be Embiid because one, they would have Simmons for 5 years compared to Embiid's 3 years. Also, Simmons, though he had some injury struggles, I think he's been relatively healthy throughout his career, and I think teams are willing to bet on that as well. And that goes without mentioning the poor market for centers in the NBA. There's a reason that teams such as the Jazz and the Pistons aren't that willing to pay Rudy Gobert and Andre Drummond. The Pistons trade away Drummond for virtually nothing, and rumors are the Jazz are not going to offer Rudy Gobert the Supermax even though he's eligible for it. The reason is, centers really just are not worth that much unless you are a true unicorn. And Embiid is a top 3 center in the league, do not get me wrong, but you can find somebody relatively cheaper and not have to spend assets to go trade for them that does a solid job at what Embiid is doing for you on the floor. The reality is the center position can really be filled by a lesser player as long as the system complements what they do down low or outside the three-point arc, whatever type of player they are. Realistically, it just matters more on the system rather than the player. You go ahead and look at it, and the Lakers were successful with Dwight Howard and JaVale McGee playing their center position. They went on to win the championship. The Clippers had Ivica Zubac and Montrezl Harrell playing their center position. The Bucks had Brook Lopez, and the Toronto Raptors ran with Marc Gasol and Chris Boucher. And like I said before, yes, Embiid is really good for center. Some argue the best, some would argue top 3 at worst. The situation is teams would much rather focus on Ben Simmons' defensive versatility and his playmaking rather than Joel Embiid's paint dominance. And for the 76ers, I think it makes sense. They would keep Joel Embiid, who is the same caliber of player as Ben Simmons, plus they would get more back in a trade, whether that be players or whether that be draft picks for the future. All sorts of options are out there, but retaining the best value in a trade is probably the best route to go. Like I said before, if you put Embiid and Simmons on the same level as players, and you can get more for Simmons as a player in the trade market, why not keep the same player, Joel Embiid, they are same caliber, and bring in better assets, better players with the Ben Simmons trade? It makes them better. They're getting more value, the team is getting better, and you still have a top 3 center on your team. This could definitely set up the 76ers for success now and in the future. So at the end of the day, I think Philadelphia needs to trade away Ben Simmons and retain the most possible value in a trade. Then they can focus on finding the right pieces to put around Joel Embiid and grow for the future. Embiid's still very young and there's still time to work with it, but one of Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid has to go. However, I do think it's close, so if they do go on and trade Joel Embiid and keep Ben Simmons, I wouldn't be mad at them whatsoever. I just think that Simmons is going to get you the most value, and you can build a better team that way than vice versa, because Embiid is not giving you as much value. There's also a world where the 76ers trade both Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. Morey and Rivers are both signed for 5 seasons. It's possible they want to start the process 2.0, trade Simmons and Embiid, get players or assets that would fit better together, and really just build a new team with a different system than the 76ers have had before and try and win a championship that way. Before the 76ers hired Daryl Morey and we thought Elton Brand was making the decisions, I thought they would keep both Simmons and Embiid. But now, with Daryl Morey, you never know. Both players could be heading out the door. He could prefer to sell both of his top players for players that fit his system better or for draft picks in the future. After the 2020 NBA draft, the next few draft classes' quality is really, really good, and there are potential superstars in those drafts. Maybe Morey wants to go out and find his next James Harden. If he can go out and find a really good player, say a Cade Cunningham, on a rookie deal, you have the Horford contract expiring within a few seasons, all of a sudden you could be building a really, really good team and just getting yourself set up for very, very bright future days ahead. Now, personally, I do doubt that both Embiid and Simmons do get traded, but if the problems do continue to come and arise even worse, I could potentially see it within the next couple of seasons. But for now, I think Philly needs to just focus their time on trading Ben Simmons, retaining the absolute most value, and putting the right pieces around Joel Embiid. Otherwise, I don't see them being a championship contender for a very, very long time. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. I do really appreciate it. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you have not done that already. All of your guys' support has been great, and I really do appreciate that. So thank you guys so much for watching again, and smash that like button. That is all I have for today's video. I will see you guys in the next one. Peace out.